To start with, I would like to give you a brief about these three guests for this session, starting with Mr. Raghav Chandra. He is the president of Society for Culture and Environment and, as I said earlier, director of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. From the IAS, he has been the Secretary Government of India and before that, Chairman, National Highways Authority of India. He has written extensively on management and infrastructure issues. He is also the author of novels Scent of a Game, Kali's Daughter, the book that we are under the discussion about. And he has edited the book Eternal's Wisdom of the Tribes. He is also on the managing committee of the Delhi Golf Club and writes a column for Business World magazine. He has a master's degree from Delhi University and Harvard University, USA. I think that certainly calls for an applause because उन्हीं की वजह से आज हम सब यहाँ मौजूद हैं और literature को enjoy कर रहे हैं, rich quality literature का अनुभव कर रहे हैं. Moving on, as our first discussant, we have Niharika Singh ji. She is an accomplished theatre and film personality. She is visiting expert faculty with National School of Drama and has been head of acting faculty with Barry John Acting Studio. She has acted in and mentored a number of internationally acclaimed and award-winning films. As a psychologist, she brings a unique and valuable perspective to performing arts. She has her own film production house and has produced and directed a number of documentary films. As our second discussant for the day, we have Dr. Pradeep Kapoor, a medical doctor by profession but a writer by passion. He has published 10 books with Rupa Publications, Amaryllis, sorry. Thank you, and Indra Publications. He has 5 books on parenting and the rest of the ones are based on fiction. And मैं चाहूँगा सबसे ज़्यादा ज़ोरदार तालियों के साथ हम उनका स्वागत करें स्टेज पर and I would request them to unfold their conversation.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, a book should have a good opening and a great ending. So, Kali's Daughter qualifies on both counts. It has a gripping opening, a sad chapter, and a great ending, which those who have, I hope, people who have read it must appreciate that. So, at the beginning, I would like to ask you, what prompted you to write this book? Was there a trigger for it?
So, Dr. Saab, Niharika ji, first of all, thanks for being here. Caste is a subject which one has been exposed to as a civil servant, as a social issue in India, right from the day one joined the service in 1982. As a subdivisional magistrate, as an ADM, as a collector, later on in various other positions as Commissioner Tribal Welfare for a while. Then, after my posting as chairman of the National Highways Authority, I was posted as the secretary of the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, and I was associated with various committees which were connected with atrocities and so on. So I thought of combining the subject of caste with a romance set in the civil services. Most of these stories about the subject of caste, about Dalits, have been written in backgrounds which reveal how exploited they are, set in very, very backward, mostly rural settings, talk about their extreme exploitation, expropriation from their land, rapes, devastation, burning of their huts. I thought that there was a need to bring about this subject in a more urban setting, in a more modern setting, in a setting which would go beyond the dichotomy of urban-rural, which would go beyond the Savarn and the Dalit, which would combine all these various facets and try and provide a more realistic, balanced picture. So I'm very happy to say that perhaps after Mulk Raj Anand's Untouchable, written in 1935, this is perhaps one of the few books written by a non-Dalit about a subject like that, set in the elite civil services. And certainly even today, despite what we may say, a few fraction of us manage to, go out of the country, but the IAS and the Foreign Service still remain very elite services. And therefore, I thought it was very poignant, very pertinent to bring about this subject and explain it through the lens of a civil servant.
I have read this book and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. It has a fair depiction of Indian society. So how easy or difficult was it to maintain a balanced narrative throughout the book? That is what is so charming about this book. That it doesn't weave to any side or doesn't give you any preachy, it doesn't become preachy. So that is a tough job according to what I feel. So how could you manage that balanced narrative right from page 1 to the end?
Well, I thought that was very essential to the entire narrative, because here is a girl who is a first generation civil servant, her father, and incidentally a lot of the book is set in Madhya Pradesh. So she is born into a Madhya Pradesh project officer's family in Patalkot in Chhindwara. Then she lives in Bhopal, and she's practically never stepped out of Bhopal in all her life except for the civil services interview. And therefore it was relatively easy for me to, to understand her journey. But what was more difficult as an author and as a male author was to place myself in the shoes of a woman, and that too a Dalit woman, and in a service which I have not been in, which is the Foreign Service. What I'm gratified to say is that most of my Foreign Service colleagues, even my Dalit colleagues, and even my woman colleagues, they have appreciated the book and they found it extremely realistic. And there was this fear that, when you're writing as a non-Dalit, you may be criticized for taking on a subject in either a very patronizing language, or you are expropriating somebody's agenda. But I'm very happy to say that in all the reviews that have come out, whether in the Tribune in Chandigarh, written by a civil servant who is a Dalit, written by non-Dalits in the Hindustan Times in Lucknow, written by women writers, they've all been rather appreciative, and therefore I would like to believe, and it's for you to tell me, I would like to believe that the narrative is balanced and does justice to the subject.
In medical terminology, TLC we use very commonly for total leukocyte counts, or the total white cell count. So this character, Deepika Thakur, has been written with so much heart, and that same TLC can be used here for her. Tender, loving care. So that is what Raghav Chandraji has done with the character of Deepika Thakur, and I think he should be given a loud round of applause for that.
I found the characterization particularly very well nuanced, and the characterizations I found were well nuanced, and so I would like to know who is your favorite character.
My favorite character remains Deepika, the female protagonist who joins the Foreign Service, and she's a very, very sympathetic character, I would say, in the sense that she has experienced life in all its vicissitudes, and yet she remains, and she does perceive everything. She's a very perceptive person, if you observe. She is conscious of all the oppression that her family has faced, her grandfather, grandmother, her father, She's conscious of all the taunts and snide remarks that her colleagues plaster her with. And they're all very subtle because they're all in the IAS and the IFS and nobody talks about caste. And it's made very clear, and amongst them they say, who talks about caste here? And yet they are casteist in their various snide remarks. They subtly talk about the subject of quota. They are not comfortable with, sharing rooms with the Dalit and things like that. So these are very subtle things which one takes for granted. But how they affect the psyche of the other person is something which is not often taken into account. But she never reacts. And despite her lover, Vijay, who's from JNU, who's a bit of an activist, who's a Dalit, in the foreign service like her, and she perceives a long-term relationship and long-term future with Vijay, and it seems like a sustainable relationship that can forge. Yet, despite Vijay trying to provoke her into thinking about a larger cause, about trying to, even think in terms of leaving the service to espouse the larger cause of activism, she says that we can do more by remaining in the service, and we should, we share a common present, and he says a common apprehension of the future. She says no, a common optimism of the future. So she's a very level-headed, a very fine girl, and you must tell me how you found Deepika as a person and whether you agree with my characterization and my narrative or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that you've done full justice, and as you said, your women colleagues have sort of agreed with how well you've brought out the psyche. So many congratulations on that. And since you're an insider to the elite IS club, I would like to know, sir, does this really exist?
So yes, as I said, everyone professes that there is no caste in the civil services. Everyone says that in the academy there is no distinction, and yet there are subtle ways, and this is a story. And all stories are not necessarily something which are happening every day, but like a murder doesn't happen every day, but it does reveal something about society. So she is conscious of the fact that, Vijay provokes her and is constantly kind of scratching the issue and saying that, aren't you observant and aren't you conscious of the way they behave? So she says, no. I mean, they're perfect. How are they? She says they're perfectly decent. And then he goes on, like that for the next few minutes, and they're all alone. And then she says, it's not as if I'm made of stone. It's not that I'm not aware. And, when Rajesh gets snippy, and he kind of looks at me in this very strange way, as if there's something wrong with me, as if there's something missing in me. And even though we play badminton every day, and we're a very, very coherent foursome, and we play badminton, yet he doesn't drink water from the same bottle that I drink from, even if I haven't brought it to my mouth. And in the dining room, quite often he leaves and moves over to another place without giving a reason why he's moving over, and he just lifts his plate and goes out. So these are very subtle things. And all this while our narrative of caste has been about, exploitation, direct confrontation. There is something more subtle about it, which in one paragraph, if you permit, I will read out.
Sure.
And it's a very strong paragraph, but pardon the strong words, but the object of writing it was essentially to convey the extent of hurt that Deepika feels when this Aman's mother reacts to her in a very, very unpleasant way and keeps asking her various questions, trying to triangulate which caste she belongs to. And short of asking her whether she's a Dalit, she asks, goes around and around and around, asking her a dozen questions until she gets absolutely fed up. And she says it's almost as if she was asking her all the better to eat you with. So, Mrs. Thakur, Mrs. Acharya's last question to her is, what are you? And what are you? Deepika thought Mrs. Acharya sounded like the big bad wolf ready to pounce upon Red Riding Hood with a warning, all the better to eat you with. She felt stunned by this unexpected crudeness. Her blood boiled. Did this pompous empress past her expiry date have no sense of tolerance? Such humiliation was the last thing she'd expected from people who looked civilized and who occupied the most privileged positions in public life. Her sixth sense had been correct. Clearly, social status was uppermost on their minds. So it was clear that in India, constitutional safeguards were only props in politicians' electoral speeches or fashionable legal frameworks for discourse in UN-sponsored conferences, or mere pages for fashioning cones to serve chana murmura, the popular snack sold in the makeshift stalls outside Shastri Bhavan, Tees Hazari and India Gate. Did that not make India a chana murmura republic? In India, you wouldn't be punished for... Now, this is critical, because so far, whenever you're talking of Dalit issues, you're talking of beatings, hurt, the Atrocities Act always comes up, so many Dalit huts burned, fields razed, but no one's talking of the psychological damage which occurs to them. In India, you wouldn't be punished for what you said, because pain could only be physical. Bodily pain was the only pain the lawmakers ever envisaged, not the mental pain that people like her so often experienced in their dealings with others. You could get away by talking loosely, even shamelessly, about caste, because use of this word is also of other 4+ letter words like Dada or Luka Patanikama and many others like that, which comprise the argot of the higher caste when they addressed her people, was neither taboo nor a crime.
Do you believe India has a very comprehensive assertive action program for upliftment of downtrodden? If yes, then why still we have so much disparity present in our society, and what more needs to be done about it?
This is fiction, so I'm not going into the entire politics of the subject, and I don't want to, it's not prescriptive either, this book, though it's for you to form your own opinions. And a lot can be done, so I won't go into this. This is an entirely, it's a subject which I've researched very, very comprehensively. But if you read Vijay's final blog which he writes, when he is repatriated and he's back in India and he writes about all these issues. So he is talking about Ambedkar and he's talking about, all those subjects. Clearly a lot needs to be done, and I begin somewhere in the, let me read out that paragraph. I'm talking of the matrimonial. I'll just mention
that's
it.
An interesting.
So, all our matrimonial columns today, they still have for, Jats, for Rajputs, for Brahmins, for Kayasths, and even today, mainstream newspapers, magazines, they carry these kind of and they're comfortable with saying that. So, a society which cannot condemn caste-based advertisements for matrimony, how can we think of doing away with caste in the short run? That is the first basic step that we must take. And then Deepika at one stage, when she's talking to the ambassador's wife, this Malika, who's the wife of the ambassador in Spain, and the master's wife is a very open, liberal lady, although she's a Brahmin, and they are very good friends, and they go out in swaris together, they go out eating, they attend all the art concerts, and she's, reflecting on the life of Malika with her husband, and so Malika is talking to her, and then she reflects on the fact that her husband has removed his casteist surname, and he's called Abhishek Amrit, which she's kind of reflecting in her mind could be the name of either a racehorse or a spaceship. And she said, and at that moment because she's been reminded about Vijay and all that, so she's feeling very a little forlorn, and she says how nice it would be if people could give away clunky surnames like Gupta, Mittal, Mishra, and Srivastav, and so on, and adopt surnames like this. That would be the beginning of the end of caste.
That's beautiful. Sir, it's a little personal, but I've never really asked you this before. That are you also, sort of practicing what you preach?
Yeah, that's well, I'm trying to, Niharika. That's all that I can say. That some of the jobs that one has done, one has tried to be as inclusive as possible, and I do have, as someone who worked very closely with me. In fact, he's sitting here. Jagdish is here, and who's been part of my family for a very, very long time, and he represents a community which has been very, very downtrodden and deprived.
Okay, so do you think it's gotten any better in the services about casteism from your time?
I think with economic progress, earlier when there was not adequate economic progress, there was a sort of convergence between caste and class. So that convergence has now given way. There is, a person who is a Dalit need not necessarily be absolutely poor, but you still do not have Dalit billionaires, and you do not have many Dalit entrepreneurs. And if you were to look, and why India? This is a global phenomenon that even the blacks in the US, and McKinsey has brought out a study on the economic status of the blacks, that even in their society, which is relatively more prosperous than ours, which is far more open than ours, and they do not have any casteism, even then, just on the basis of this very recent phenomenon of racism, because of that, and our caste is 2000 years old as a phenomenon, they have the median growth in economic status of the blacks versus the non-blacks. They have shown that the divergence has increased tremendously. I don't have those figures here, but that's a fact, that the divergence has grown. And in India also, while all of us who are non-Dalits, our economic status has, if you were to look at our median economic figure, it would be far ahead than that of the average Dalit.
Yeah. Traditionally...
So I don't want to conform our discussion to, the politics of it all. I'd be grateful if you confine to the story.
So I loved the title, Kali's Daughter, and since I've read the book, I would know why you chose to name it, but to share it with the...
Explain that. So she, in her house, and these are some issues which we all need to reflect on when she gets into the IS, and I'm going about it in the manner in which it's been described in the book as well. So in Bhopal, in her small little apartment, all her guests and friends in the neighborhood, they think that she's performed a miracle by getting into the IS, and they stand at a distance and they observe her and all that. And then after they leave, she goes, so I'm going to read out a couple of paragraphs which are relevant to why this is called Kali's Daughter. It was after a long time that the self-invited guests left. As soon as they got their first quiet moment, her parents and she gathered around a clay pot in their veranda. It held a tulsi sapling, a stone statuette of the goddess Kali, an old butter lamp, and a brass bell. After her mother had lit the lamp, Deepika touched the feet of the goddess, and her father rang the bell. "Your Deepu has done it, Ma," said her mother. She also bowed with folded hands before the framed pictures on the walls of Buddha. Many from her community had already escaped the rigors of the caste system and converted to Buddhism. Hanuman, she adored the handsome monkey god, a metaphor for aboriginal trustworthiness. Shirdi Sai Baba, a Sufi saint who chose to keep his religion a secret. And Mother Teresa, the Catholic nun from Europe, whose life's mission was to serve the downtrodden in India. And then later,
दोस्तों सन्नाटा अच्छा नहीं लगता पर तालियों की गूंज जरूर अच्छी लगती है, तो अपना सपोर्ट दिखाते रहिए बीच बीच में।
So here she's talking about the experiences she'd had in her life, and how things were, how in school somebody cut off her long hair. That at that age, loss of long hair was as tragic as death, and so on. She complained emphatically to the class teacher, who merely mocked her and all that for trying to provoke jealousy amongst other classmates. Before every major board examination, her books would often be missing. And the worst cut was when people insisted on knowing her caste. The clever ones, and her father had changed his surname from, he was Prem Kishan Chamar, he changed it to Prem Kishan Thakur. Because his boss, who was a very nice, benevolent Rajput officer by the name of Ranjit Singh, once they were working on drought relief, famine relief in Bundelkhand, and when they were coming back, he said, "You're such a nice man, you're so handsome, you're tall, you're athletic, why do you keep a name like Chamar?" So he said, "Sir, that's what I've been born with. That's what my father had, what my grandfather had, that's my name, and that's my caste." He said, "But why do you want to tie a racehorse with a donkey? And if you change your name to something like, which is indistinguishable, like Thakur or Verma or Singh, people will, not mock you later on for your jobs, etc. It will be easier, it will benefit your children also. So take my advice, change it and start wearing better clothes, iron your clothes, don't wear sandals, wear shoes, and wear colorful clothes." So here, having said that, I'm reading out this portion, which will relate to why, Kali's daughter. The worst cut was when people insisted on knowing her caste. The clever ones knew Thakur was only a shield, a camouflage. They persisted until she was forced to reveal Chamar, and then they would sneer that they had guessed that in the first place, or smirk to suggest that a person's background couldn't remain hidden for long. Some would taunt the academic or career prospects of a Chamar and the pointlessness of their education. The more altruistic ones would think that they had done their social responsibility deed of the day to have spoken nicely to her. Despite the fact that she's a Chamar, I wasn't rude. I spoke to her with gentle tameez. Such incidents repeated in quick succession and continued over a length of time, at times made her feel defective by birth. Sometimes she cursed her luck, and at other times she wept before her grandparents. Other than offering compassion, they admitted that they were powerless and had no idea what they should do. One day, she too had hidden a pair of scissors in a school bag to eke out her revenge. But her grandmother discovered them. She calmed her anger, but pulled her ears. Then her father had learnt about it and had rushed to talk to her. With a wealth of ingrained knowledge, he said, "Deepu, we can't afford to make mistakes or annoy anybody. If we are to rise beyond our current status, be observant, be calm, be patient." At yet another time, anguished by the continuous struggle to be given a just treatment, she burst out crying and banged her fists against her father. "How am I different from the other kids? What have I done wrong? Why should everybody be after me?" He wiped her tears, pulled her hair back and kissed her forehead. Then he consoled her. "Nobody can put us down," he said. "We have God's protection. Even Gandhiji said that we are Harijans, God's own people. So I am God's own woman," he said with tears in his eyes. He held her cheeks in his palms and gazed into her eyes with a feeble smile. "You are Kali's daughter." She had jumped with relief and kissed her father. It was her turn to wipe his tears with her hands.
So, Mr. I see this book lend itself beautifully to a movie. So, is there a chance we get to see a movie based on it soon?
I really wouldn't know, but I believe some people are reading it.
Yeah, because the characters are
Deepika can
truly
star in it.
nuanced. Oh yeah.
Deepika can star in it.
From one Deepika to another Deepika.
Yes. Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I would like to request you to please open the stage for questions from the audience. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and our volunteer will approach you with a mic. Any questions? ऐसा हो नहीं सकता कि इतनी interesting
And no questions on the politics or on the the prescriptive cures for this kind of thing.
Ashish?
मेरा नाम हर्षित तिवारी है सर.
See, what an author writes is based on his experiences and perceptions, and as a civil servant you run through so much in life, 36 years of grounded experience as Commissioner Tribal Welfare, Secretary of the National Commission, and as a collector, as a Principal Secretary Urban Development, Principal Secretary Revenue. You are meeting so many officers that it's all somewhere or the other it comes in, not directly,
पर्सनल
but
एक्सपीरियंस है ये कंप्लीट आपका. ओके सर, थैंक यू.
Next question, please.
The book. I must say that what you've written about the foundation course and how it is conducted is absolutely to the dot. Congratulations on that. I also wanted you to share with the group here about the perception of different officers during the village training. Remember that?
Yes.
Seeing that was there. I thought that would be a very good reflection on how young people of different castes see rank exploitation.
So all those who want to know anything about what happens when IAS and IFS officers go for their foundation course to the National Academy of Administration, and Sanjeev Chopra Sahab is currently Secretary Government of India and Director in the National Academy at Mussoorie. So I'm glad that he's found that it's realistic. So that half of the book talks about the various incidents and adventures that occur to Deepika and her colleagues in the course of their stay in the academy, which includes the village attachment. So they go to the village attachment, the trek, the literature event in the academy, and various such events. And in the village attachment, they go over to a fictional village called Tulsi Gram, which is, the Sarpanch is one Lalan Singh. And two boys have been detained, have been bound against a neem tree and beaten up, and their shirts have been torn, they've been walloped only because they refused to lift the carcass of a dead cow which was lying in front of the Ram temple. And they said that, you're Dalits, you're supposed to be doing it. And because they had refused to do it, they were walloped. So when all four of them walk across to Lalan Singh, who has otherwise been, feeding them and bringing them lovely lassi, lovely stuff to be entertained with, he suddenly, and because one of the boys who has the violators is his nephew. So Lalan Singh and Deepika says, let the Prevention of Atrocities Act be imposed, and I will get an FIR registered. And then the dynamic that takes place amongst the four of them, between Deepika Thakur, Aman Acharya, the Brahmin boy, Rajesh Singh, the Thakur boy, and Arundhati Gupta, who is the fourth person. And the dynamic that plays out is, I think, something which could practically happen any time when four such constituents from different communities face a problem which is very, very realistic.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I proclaimed you as our own Wilbur Smith. Forgive me if you do not like him. Anyway, this second book was very, very dear to me for many, many reasons. And in the span of time that I read it. Now, I have to be very optimistic because that is my basic nature. And that is, I want you to share with us your next project.
On a social theme, and I don't know what that is going to be, but could be, I have several ideas and I will share them with you in private.
Yes. The last question for the session. Anyone who wants to ask the last question, or else should we conclude? Yes.
कि हमारी जो सोसाइटी है एक जो अनटचेबिलिटी को अभी भी कैरी कर रही है, कि हम अगर देखें कि हमारी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ने भी उन्हें काफ़ी अधिकार दिए हैं, बट अभी जो लोग ट्रेडिशन जब भी अभी भी वही फॉलो कर रहे हैं जब स्टार्टिंग से फॉलो करें। जो गांधी जी ने उनके लिए हरिजन बनाया, उनको काफ़ी प्रमोट करने की कोशिश कर रहा है।
उनको मत बोलिए, हमारे ही लोग हैं।
हाँ जी, तो ये चीज़ें कहाँ मतलब एक रह रही है कि मतलब कहाँ गलती हो रही है कि अगर उसे कैसे इम्प्रूव किया जाए कि वो जो फीलिंग्स है, ये जो थिंकिंग है, उनको चेंज किया जाए।
मैं अलग से आपसे बात करके आपको अपने विचार बताऊंगा इस विषय में। तिवारी जी, प्रभात।
Yes.
सर, आपका पहला वाला नॉवल भी जो वाइल्ड लाइफ पे था वो भी पढ़ा, दूसरा भी ये देखा, तो ये वाकई में ये जो सोशल इश्यूज है जिसको आपने इसमें रेज किया, पहला वाइल्ड लाइफ पोचिंग उसको आपने उसमें रेज किया था, तो ऐसे और कौन कौन से सब्जेक्ट्स हो सकते हैं? इसके अलावा और कौन कौन से सब्जेक्ट्स हैं जिनमें आपका इंटरेस्ट आगे कि उसमें हो सकता है? कृपया एनलाइटन करें।
You know, and it's a subject which is totally distinct from this in the life of Tulsi Das. So I might do research on that.
So that brings us to the conclusion for this very interesting. Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to say that this book has been rated as one of the favorites and a must read in the Economist magazine, and also for all the youngsters who are preparing for the civil services and their parents, I think you should go and buy the book right now. Would sort of give you a great insight.
Yes. The book's available at the stalls, and you can surely buy it, and might turn out to be a source of inspiration for every one of you. And thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you so much, Niharika ma'am, for such a wonderful talk. I think हमें तालियों के साथ बताना चाहिए कि कितना अच्छा सेशन था.